Hi guys, welcome back to Table Talk with Zach and Carly. This is our second episode. Woo! And today we're going to be talking about communication. Hope you were able to catch last week's video on forgiveness. And like, subscribe, share, and of course comment down below your thoughts. And if this has helped you in any way, we would love to hear that. And if it's helped someone else that you've shared it with, we'd also love to hear that too.
Okay, so we're going to talk about communication tonight, like Carly said. So we're going to talk about kind of the importance of communication in a relationship. We're going to talk about our own styles of communication, whether it be verbal, nonverbal, the way we process information. We're going to talk about our partner's, communication style and how our communication style sometimes dictates theirs, from their own tendencies. Then from there, we're going to lead into an activity about communication. We'll kind of learn how we communicate when we're not even paying attention to the details, right, about a relationship or how to apply it, right? So be able to go through an activity. It's fun. We'll go with you guys, and hopefully you'll be able to kind of take away what I was able to take away when we did this. After that, we'll talk about a few tips on clarifying communication and how to better understand each other. We're not always on the same page, and that's okay. We have different communication styles. So, really have to learn how to ask the right questions so we know what they're trying to say to us. First, like I said, communication is, the foundation of a relationship. If you don't have communication or you have poor communication, it's not likely you're going to have a successful or a long relationship.
And it's important, when you are looking at your partner's style or, your own style of communication, where it comes from. So it really does take a lot of reflection to look back and think, am I picking up style from my parents? Am I picking it up from my coworkers, my siblings, my friends, people who actually have influence on your life? It's not uncommon to pick up the things that they also do. It's not a bad thing. But sometimes, it will hinder our ability to communicate effectively if we aren't willing to really reflect and acknowledge that we are doing it. So
we communicate the way we do. Another thing to really keep in mind when it comes to communication in relationships is what position do you put the other person in? When you're communicating, do you allow them to be, direct with you, or are you abrasive and use very structured body language where it's not, you're not allowing a response or not looking for one? Is it forcing them to be passive? Sometimes it's hard for people to say what they feel, what they think. Do you help them with your communication style, or do you further in
are you hindering them?
Yeah, hindering it. Right? Are you getting in the way of them communicating how they feel, or are you, pushing it along and encouraging them to be okay with how they feel? I think that's one thing that we have to recognize is when, we're communicating with other people and our spouse, are the answers we're getting just what we want to hear because of how we're positioning ourselves in the conversation, or is that the way they really feel? It's only up to you to decide, but I think in marriage it happens a lot. When we say pick and choose our battles, I think that's, it's fair. Not everything's, a hill worth dying on. But you still should be able to communicate, how you feel. Now, just because we disagree doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Doesn't mean that we can't get through it, right? But if I don't really know how she feels and she just submits to my way of thinking or acknowledges, what I said and has nothing to say on it, for me, I'm just going to assume that there was no issue to begin with. And then we lead into the forgiveness, what we talked about last week. We're 5 years down the road, like, hey, I didn't like when you did that.
You have to be able to openly communicate in a successful way to your partner. And, this is not just a partner thing. This is going to be helpful, hopefully, in a lot of aspects in your life.
So now we're going to talk about our partner style. I don't think it's something we can ever really assume. So I don't want you to think that's what I'm trying to do here. But I want you to be, after we reflect on the way we communicate, we got to really evaluate how we position ourselves around our partner to where we, which avenue we allow them to communicate back to us down.
Picking up on the way you are responding to your partner but also the way they are responding to you in their communication, whether that's nonverbal or verbal. So, you can assume that you know what your partner's thinking. You can assume that you know the way they're going to respond or react to a certain situation. But really, do you really know? Or are you just assuming? That is what we're here to talk about today. So, let's get started
with a little bit of communication
and action. So it's important that, just like in the forgiveness, in communication, there is no room to be defensive. You don't need to jump to conclusions. You don't need to assume what the other person means. That is not communication. When we did it, we learned a lot about our communication styles, and especially towards one another, how we take direction, how we give direction. It's very important, and how we listen. So for this game, you're going to need 4 sheets of paper. You will each get 2 sheets of paper. On the first sheet, you are going to label it side 1 and side 2. So on the second sheet, you're going to draw a picture. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate, just some shapes would be ideal, just because you will be explaining and directing your partner. So draw your picture. The other person cannot see it and will not see it until the very end. Get your picture ready, and then turn your chairs back to back.
Right? So when I listen to her direction and I listen to me, or pay attention to what I'm doing when I don't have the ability to respond, I listen, I listen a lot better. I don't listen to try to hear what she says, and now I want you to reorganize it in a way I want to hear it. I just listen. I trust what she's saying, and I just execute it. Right? If I have questions or concerns, I will remember them for the next time we go through the experience. When I had the ability to speak, I really stopped listening so much to what direction she was giving, and rather than listening to certain details for me to ask a question. Like, all right, the way you're doing it's, good, but it can be better if you just give me this information.
Mm-hmm.
I hear what you're saying, and I know we already did it once, but when I have the ability to ask the question, I want to influence the success on it. I want to try to make it better. And I stopped listening because we've already had the conversation before, you know what I'm saying? Right? Because we already had the conversation on side 1. So I've already heard what you had to say. So now I'm focused on what I want to say. They didn't take place in the second exercise. But for me, that's one of my opportunities. Whether we've been in a situation before, so I already know the answers to the test, right? Well, she grows as a person, I grow as a person. The conversation may have changed. I have to listen because I don't know what she's thinking. I can't complete her sentences. So we chose, me to do the listening piece because I think I had the widest spectrum between the two situations. I think that when I don't have the ability to think or speak, I'm just going to listen, and I'm going to absorb the information, and I'm going to, be very precise and trust. But when I have the ability to talk, I'm going to talk, and I'm going to make sure that I have the information the way I want to have the information.
And that's basically the important thing about this. The game is fun. It's fun to, direct your partner or whatever. Some people do like the blindfold thing. But the whole point is to understand how you listen to your partner and how you listen when they are actually allowing you to speak back to them. So instead of, like Zach was saying, assuming what your partner is going to say, you're forced to listen. But when you have the ability to ask questions, we fall back into those, well, I already know her so well, or I already know how this goes, we've been here before. But instead of just allowing yourself to understand that question or the direction and then answer, you assume the position and you assume that you already know, hence small triangle error. So talk about it. Talk about, what you were feeling, what you were actually feeling when you were giving directions, what you were feeling when you were receiving those directions. Like Zach did. Were you assuming what your partner was going to say? And then relate that to your own actual life. It's fun to do an activity, but the main point is to really understand, am I doing this in our marriage? In everyday conversation, am I cutting you off? Am I assuming what you're going to say so I'm not listening? Am I, listening with the intent to respond, or am I listening with the intent to actually listen?
Also with that is communication. We didn't do it the other way around, but I think when, I was the one communicating, my directions were very precise, very, very detailed oriented. And then when she had the ability to respond, I felt myself getting frustrated. Like, hey, I'm giving you these detailed, instructions that you followed last time. I don't understand why we're going a little back and forth here right now. And again, it's just a game. But again, same thing in marriage, right? Hey, we've already had this conversation before. Why have things changed? Why are you, it went perfect the first time this way. We can have the same we're definitely talking about the two, different sides of it, the listening and then the communicating, the verbal direction or conversation, and where you're leading that piece. You got to really think about the listening piece. Is, do I really understand what they're saying? When I get, hey, can you pick your clothes up? Now, does she really mean like, hey, can I pick my clothes up? Or does she mean, hey, stop putting your clothes on the floor? Right? I mean, very, very simple example. But, what is she saying to me? Do I actually know if I don't ask?
Ask. And it's very simple. It gets tedious, but that is how you strengthen your communication in a relationship and in a marriage, by asking. So if I give a direction and say, Zach, can you please pick your clothes up off the floor? And he doesn't understand what I'm referring to, or maybe he thinks there is a tone or, a little bit of malice behind it.
I will say, so what I heard is that you just want me to pick the clothes up that I left right there right now?
And then you have the ability to clarify what you actually mean. Sometimes we get into a habit of saying things that we understand, but our partner might not. And it's a simple, example, but it's still very real. We assume that they understand what we're saying and we want them to do it the way that we're saying it. But if they actually don't, it's a lose-lose here. So he asked a clarifying question, and the response, yes, I would like you to pick up your clothes that are laying on the floor right here. It's simple.
So there was no undertone. There was no stop putting your clothes on the floor. Right? Now, if I assume that's what she thought, what she meant by it, now we could be having a whole different conversation right now.
Yeah, it's important to understand that in communication, like I mentioned earlier, you don't need to get defensive, you don't need to assume, and you don't need to jump to conclusions, because that is really an underlying problem in communication, is when we start, assuming, jumping to conclusions, or, getting defensive. Why are you asking me to do that? Why can't you just say this? That's why it's so important to clarify. The more you clarify, the more questions you ask, the less room there is for an error to occur and for that defensive assumption, whatever, to pop up. Because the moment that you start that, you fall back into this vicious cycle of, irritation, irritability, and defensiveness, because you don't want to be questioned. You don't want to be told, you're doing something wrong. I shouldn't say all of you, but for the most part, it hurts sometimes when we are corrected on, simple small things. So clarify, ask a question. Don't get upset. Just ask and say, so what I'm hearing is blank. The important thing is that you are actually asking and you are not just getting frustrated, because then, frustration turns into, arguments, disagreements, whatever, when really it could have been stopped right then and there with a simple, so what I'm hearing is, and then say what you heard. What is it? What context did you hear that person, directing you?
So it's important to know when you are asking a clarifying question, you need to say it like a question where you actually want a response, and use a proper tone. Like, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that you want me to do X, Y, and Z, and be very open to what they respond with. Again, putting someone on the defense and making them put their guard up, you gotta ask yourself, are you the one that did it? If you want that clarifying information, if you want to know what they're asking you to do, you have to ask and make it feel like you really just want to know that, instead of, whatever way, maybe sarcasm or whatever underlying there is.
Right. Do the activity. Figure out how your partner and you communicate to one another. Talk about it. Talk about what you liked, what you didn't like, what you were feeling when you were getting directions, giving directions, when you were just listening, and then apply that. Reflect on your marriage, your relationship, whatever it might be, and actually, put it in a real life situation. Think about it. Talk about it. And then moving forward to better understand your partner, better understand your spouse, whatever, ask a clarifying question. It is so important.
One last thing about the clarifying questions is, as the person who's being asked that clarifying question, you shouldn't get offended that what we've been married 5 years. You should know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay that you can't read each other's minds. It's okay you can't tell what the other person is thinking all the time, right? If we just do that, that's how we end up on different pages, right? That's how one person ends up going left, one person goes right, right? You have to always have that open lines of communication, no matter how great your unspoken communication, verbal and nonverbal communication is. You're not always going to know, and it's okay that you don't know everything about your partner. When it comes to communication, if they say something you don't know, hey, you don't know it. It's better than assuming you think you know what they're saying and you're being completely wrong. And as the person who's, again, being asked that clarifying question, it's okay that they didn't know what you meant. Now you just got to re-explain it in a way that they need to hear it. And then you'll be better prepared for next time, again, to understand how you can clearly communicate. Takes off from a communication standpoint is, being able to have those, the good talks, right? About communication in this episode 2 of Table Talk with Zach and Carly. We talked about how communication is the foundation of any relationship. We talked about our own tendencies, how we communicate, the influences that come along with that. We talked about our partner style, how we influence that through our communication. We went through a little bit of an activity to reveal maybe a little ins and outs of our communication to ourselves and to our partner, of how they communicate, how you receive communication, and how well you do with certain restraints, and where are you better at communication, and how can we, close those gaps. We talked about a few tips, asking clarifying questions, so I, what I'm hearing is, what you're saying is, what you want me to do is, right? Those kind of questions to really draw the information out, kind of like in the activity, to where you're just trying to get to that end state and be on the same page. Again, communication is the foundation. Without good communication, it's going to be rough, right? You see Peyton Manning out there in the field yelling Omaha, some good things are going to happen. Right? You got to have those Omahas in your marriage.
Guys, I hope you have a great Wednesday,
And a great night.
and I hope you enjoyed. Cheers.